Creating a contrasty black and white look on your photos is actually pretty straightforward and easy. Today, I'm going to show you two ways that you can create that using ON1 Photo RAW. So let's go ahead and jump right into the computer. So here we are inside of ON1 Photo RAW with the file. And of course, if you want to download the file, you can grab it in the description box below and follow along. But I highly recommend that you work on your own image so that way you can see how this technique translates to your images. Now, the first step that we want to do is remove all of the color because that's going to have the largest impact on the image. So I recommend anytime you plan to work in black and white, you do that immediately. All right. In order for us to do that for this first demonstration, we're going to jump over to the effects tab and we're going to add in a black and white effects filter. And very simply, this just removes all the color so that way we're not distracted by any of the color. But the other reason that we do this first is we need to get the color response the way that we want it, just as the image is, without doing any other tonal adjustments, whatever it may be. All right, so I don't recommend that you start with develop. In this case, I recommend that you start with the black and white effects filter and you just start to play with your color response. Now, there's two ways that you can change the color response, and this is completely subjective, right? And every image is going to need something a little bit different. The first way is you can hit auto on or off, and that's got a very, very mild adjustment that's happening to the image, but there is something happening nonetheless. Then the other way, which this is kind of how I like to work with my images when I have no idea which direction I want to take this, other than I know that I want it to be contrasted. If you come over to the color response drop down here, you can change this to channel mixer. And what I love about channel mixer is I don't have to think about what colors are in my image. All I have to do is say, okay, I just pull this slider until I get to a color response. And what I'm looking for is something that's going to really separate my colors in the image and make each area of the photo, or at least where colors were in the initial black and white, stand out or gets me closer to that contrasted look, right? The goal is to get to a contrasty look. So in my mind, the darks need to be dark and the brighter areas need to be brighter. So this area, 237 on the channel mixer, is about the most appropriate for the look that I'm going for. And then I will stop messing with the black and white filter here for now. The next step is to come over to develop, and I like to just click Brilliance AI because I've gotten used to what it does to my image. But if you don't like Brilliance AI or don't want to use Brilliance AI, that's perfectly fine. All you have to do is come down to tone and color, and you can modify this to your heart's content. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and activate Brilliance AI. So that way it looks at the image, does what it needs to do, and it looks like it's already done. And I like what it's actually done here. So in this area around the top of the fountain, it's opened up some of those shadows and kind of balanced everything, but it kept the base look of what I already established in the black and white filter. The Brilliance AI just kind of helped bring things out a little bit more. Now that we have everything essentially set foundationally, right? I haven't actually added in extra contrast or anything of the sort. So now it's time to start applying our contrast. And this is the first method that I would show you, right? Everything else is going to start from here. So what I'm going to do is create a snapshot, and we'll just call this foundation. The reason I'm creating the snapshot is I want to be able to revert to this foundation when we go between our two methods that I'm going to show. Foundation is great. You could save this as a preset if you really wanted to. You don't have to. I know a lot of people don't like to do that, but I'm going to use it as a snapshot. Let's keep moving. So now that we have our foundation set, it's time to get started with adding in additional contrast. The way that I like to do this is come back over to the Effects tab, click on Add Filter, and add in a bleach bypass. Now, some of you may have seen me do this before because this is a very, very typical technique for me. I love doing this when I want to go contrasty black and white. This should be familiar, but I will cover it for anyone who hasn't seen me do this before. The goal with the bleach bypass is to add in a little bit more drama to the overall image. So what you can do is increase the amount, and I'm going to just pull that up, and you can see how the darker areas start to get dark and then the brighter areas get bright. Now you can hold down the J key so you can see your clipping warnings. And if you plan to print this, I highly recommend that you do this. But I'll show you another trick at the end of the video to kind of pull back some of those issue areas. If you just can't control it throughout the process, there is a way to kind of save the image and prepare it for printing if that's what you choose to do. So with that being said, I'm going to actually increase the contrast on this particular image. Every image is going to need something different when you work with the bleach bypass. And I'm going to leave detail alone this go round. Sometimes I like to mess with detail. You don't have to. You can play around with the brightness if you feel like your image is either too bright or too dark. But I think the exposure in the image was actually appropriate after I've applied that Bruins AI. So I captured it well. The Bruins AI really brought out the areas that I care about the most. And I think that the fountain is well lit. You know exactly what it is, and it stands out decently against the background. You will have to do some local adjusting. Maybe we will do some local adjusting to help this stand out a little bit better against that background. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Let's go local, hit add adjustment, and I'm going to increase my exposure just a little bit. I'm going to hit the letter W on my keyboard. This gives me my AI quick mask brush, which is by far my favorite tool to use for masking inside of ON1 Photo RAW. And I'm just going to select the portions of the fountain that I need to help stand out from the background. So I'm going to click those. I already have my brush set to paint, so that means it's going to apply it in those areas or whatever the adjustment is. And I'm just going to hit the blue check mark to commit that. And you'll notice that my fountain in those areas gets a little bit brighter. It's actually a little too bright. So instead of messing with the exposure, all I'm going to do is pull back on the opacity. And so it starts to blend where I think that it makes the most sense for it to help it stand out. Now I'm running into an issue down here where it is just way too bright in this one little area. So instead of doing anything difficult, I'm just going to grab a brush. I'm going to hit the letter O, and we'll change the masking overlay to the red overlay, just so that way I can see where I'm painting on my image. And then using my brush tool, let's get the brush tool. There we go. Using the brush tool, I'm just going to erase from this area like so. That way, I don't have to worry about that area being too bright. So if I hit the letter O, you can see I've brought back some of that that brightness, so it's not like overly powerful. But you could sit here all day trying to make this look perfect, and that's why I think that you should practice on your own images. I just wanted to showcase kind of a technique to help the subject stand out from the background. Another way that I could have done that is I could have blurred the background a little bit more, but I don't want to explore that in today's tutorial. So now that I have that set the way that I want, the last thing that I'll do for this particular look is apply a glow. Now, what I like to do with my glows is just like crank them up like crazy. And I'm going for a more artistic look. This may not be something that you want in your own image, but what I like to do with my glows is really just crank up the volume and then play around with my halos. And what the halos do is they brighten certain areas, which again, we're going for that contrasty look. So when things get a little bit brighter, I think that it helps sell this particular look. So I like to pull up on the halos and watch the image get a little bit brighter. And to me, this looks like it was more shot on film. I'm really leaning towards making things look a little bit less perfect. So that's the reason why I like to just crank up on the glow and then pull up on the halos to soften the overall feel of the image. Now, of course, if it's too strong, instead of pulling down on the amount, because I feel like I have a good balance with the amount and the halo slider, I just like to pull down on my opacity slider and just blend that in to my heart's content. Every image is going to look different. Again, this is an artistic feel. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time tweaking that, because I could sit here for a very long time and that would make this video very long. So this is the look number one. Let me go ahead and jump up to layers really quickly, and we will turn off the effects. So this is what the image looks like with just the develop module adjustments. And it looks like I also have the local effects turned on. And then when I turn on the actual effects here, this is what we got. All right. So that's look number one. Let's create a snapshot. Look number two is pretty straightforward. We're going to jump back to that foundation. All right. And if you're not using snapshots inside of ON1, I mean, what are you doing? I'm just kidding. Snapshots do help you out a whole lot though. All right. Snapshots get you to starting points so you can just keep experimenting without having to start over from the beginning every single time, right? Because I like this foundation, and this is my black and white foundation. So if I wanted to, I could work right here inside of my black and white filter. So what I think I'll do is I'll pull down on the blacks pretty far, and then I'll push up on my whites, and that's going to give me some contrast. And then I can also pull up on my details if, I really want to make this image like grungy pop, right? And then I still have access to this contrast slider. So we're really going to make this contrast like crazy. Maybe even push the highlights a little bit further. And I'm going overboard with this look because I know I can dial it back. All right. So we'll just keep playing around here and maybe pull down on the brightness. So that is what I would do with my tone. All right. Now, the next step here is I would apply a dynamic contrast. And what I love about the dynamic contrast is you can just go overboard. Now, I have a video showing how I like to use dynamic contrast, which is very simply choosing one of these styles. So for me, I'm going to select surreal for this particular image, and that looks fantastic. I'm just kidding. It doesn't look fantastic at all. What I'm going to do is invert this mask, and I only care to apply the dynamic contrast around the fountain. So the way that I'm going to do it is using my AI masking brush, and I press the letter W. It gives me this tool. I'm going to click here, and I don't necessarily need to select the water because water shouldn't have like this extra detailed look to it. So it does a really good job at selecting the fountain automatically there. I'm going to hit the plus or the check mark, not the plus icon. It's only going to apply this adjustment to that area. Then what I'm going to do is just pull down on my opacity until I feel like it's blended in properly, maybe somewhere around here. Next, what I want to do is jump over to the local adjustment, and I want to make kind of a vignette, like darkening effect around the background here. All right. This is stylistic, but I do think that it helps with the overall look. So what I'm going to do is hit add filter, and I'm going to use my AI quick mask brush to select my fountain again. This time I am going to select the water because I want this to be part of my cutout. Okay. So we're going to make sure that the entire fountain is selected. And then I'm going to hit paint, or actually we'll go with erase, and then we'll hit the check mark here. So now that effect is happening in just the background of my image. But remember, I said I wanted to be more like a vignette that's happening kind of in the background. So what I need to do is click on my mask. So I get my masking brush, and then I'm going to hit the letter M on the keyboard to get my masking bug. And then I am going to select up here the vignette, and I'm going to hit the plus icon. Now, what this does is it adds in a mask. Let me just jump over to the grayscale here. What it does is it adds in a mask on top of our AI mask. So if I pull this down, you can see kind of what's happening here, right? The areas that are black are not receiving any of the adjustment, and areas that are white are receiving this -1 exposure adjustment. So what I'm going to do is hit the letter O so I can see the image. And this allows me to kind of direct this light, right? And the light is coming from the top right and down. And you can just tell, like with the bright areas that are here on the fountain base, and then in front of the fountain here, you can see like there's direction to the light. So I want to inspire this look based off of that light. So I'm just going to rotate my vignette tool, and I'm actually going to bring it down a little bit further and then just drag out these points. So that way the light starts to feather in the same direction. So now we're getting a completely different look. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see that changes the overall look of the image. And it's not one of those, like, there's something off about this image, or, you know, something very strange. And the reason I do that is it's inspired by the light that was already there, and I'm just shaping it a little bit more. So that is one of my favorite ways of working with that. Now, if I hold down the J key, you can see I got a whole lot of clipping going on. And if I wanted to print this, I wouldn't worry so much about the blacks, other than those areas could get a little muddy depending on the type of printer and ink or dye that's being used. So what we'll do is come back over to effects. And this is actually an applicable trick or tip for any editing sequence that you may do. If you want to print it and you end up with overexposed areas or really really dark areas that are underexposed, then what you want to do is hit add filter, choose the curves filter, hold down the J key, and just pull up just a little bit. You don't have to go like crazy, right? You don't need to go like this, because if you go that far, you're likely going to get this look, unless that's what you're going for. But instead, what you're going to do is just grab your black point down here at the bottom of the curve and just pull it up a little bit. And we'll go maybe to 9. I'm looking at the output, and I think 9 is a safe area. And all that does is it tells the computer and ultimately the printer that there are no true black points in the image. So treat everything as if it were whatever this percentage of 9 is. Doesn't really matter all that much. Treat that as black, and that gives the printer enough information to put down just the right amount of ink to make sure that you don't end up with a bunch of smudges. Now, when it comes to printing, the most dangerous area are the blown out highlights, because the printer won't put anything down because it has no information there. So if you change anything, you should absolutely change the highlight point or the white point. So I'm just going to pull that down just a little bit. So 255 is the highest. I think somewhere around 250 is about appropriate. So it's very minor, but now I'm pressing and holding the J key right now, and you notice that I don't get any of those clipping indicators. So this is a way of preparing your file for print without losing too much of the dynamic range in the image. You are kind of crushing the dynamic range, but you're losing aspects of it that nobody is probably going to notice or care that much about. And if you do this often, my recommendation is that you come over here to styles, you hit drop down and you save this as a new style and just call it print ready. That way, whenever you apply this curve at the end of your workflow, you should always do this above everything else. So you notice that I have this above my dynamic contrast as well as my black and white. Add that at the very top of your effect stack so it's impacting everything that you've done. Then send it to print. But for digital, like if you're only posting this on Instagram or Facebook or wherever people are posting online now, I don't think you need this particular effect. So I recommend you turn it off and export the image so that way people can see the true information here, because computer monitors have way more information than what a printer can put onto a sheet of paper. So just keep that in mind. Here is look number 2. So let's just go ahead and hit new snapshot. Let's go look number 2. And let's take a look at number 1. So number 1 is the soft glow contrasted look. I really enjoy doing this when I want to get like crazy artistic, and I didn't go as crazy in the effects as I probably could have. I refrained myself or restrained myself. And then look number 2 is a little bit more clinically correct, but it's inspired by the light itself. And that's the difference here. All right. Still contrasty from the initial image. And I could go even further with the contrast if I really wanted to by coming back over to the develop module and just cranking up on this contrast slider. A lot of people say don't do that because this isn't like a good way of managing contrast. But if you just need to crank up the volume on the overall contrast in an image, this is a great slider to come and use. I use it, and I think everyone should know that it's available to you to use if you don't. And you shouldn't be afraid to use stuff inside of the software. Now, if you like to pick up ON1 Photo RAW, consider using my affiliate link down in the description box below. That'll take you to the pre-order site for 2026, which gives you access to the current version of ON1 until the 2026 version is released. To the best of my knowledge, my coupon code FreeWillPhotos20 does not work during the early bird pre-order pricing. So if you try to use it and it doesn't work, that could be the reason why. But if you're watching this video after the early bird pre-order pricing has been discontinued, try the coupon code and see if it's going to work for you when you purchase the 2026 version. Now, if you'd like to learn how to use ON1 Photo RAW and have someone coach you, consider signing up for a training call with me down in the description box below. And if you got questions, leave them in the comment section. Until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.